Hi, in this video I'd like to show you what I've discovered about prehistoric rock art. That the petroglyphs and the painting that we look at on rocks is only part of the picture, that the entire rock is the art. And it's true of rock art from around the world and going back 30,000 years ago. And I'm going to show you this new perspective on rock art using photos I took myself from sites around the southwestern United States. I first discovered this new way of looking at rock art when I was adjusting photos I have of a site called San Diego Mountain or Tonuco Mountain in southern New Mexico. It's fairly well known for having these strange looking masks as well as some strange characters that my friend John and I called the Starman and the ice cream cone guy. There are also strange things like dinosaur-looking figures and a cartoony fish that's about 3.5 feet across. So I was adjusting my photos, trying to bring out some of this line work and figure out what these characters really looked like. Reversing the colors, and then I started outlining and drawing the lines in so that I could see this star-shaped character. But what I discovered was that the boulders themselves appeared to have been turned into large heads and faces. As I started adjusting photos, I noticed these different colors of purple and orange colors on these rocks and started to notice that the whole rock looked like a painting. If you pause and look at these for a while, you'll see down in the lower right corner of this rock, there's a guy with a beard in the sort of pinkish areas, and above that's a face in the dark area, somebody with big lips or a fish with big lips. There's a character up in the upper right corner. Looks like he has a beard. There's all kinds of faces and characters in the rocks. So Rincon, I've discovered the rocks there that have been carved into some large heads. I've examined all these, and they're all definitely man-made. They're chipped at and painted and have been moved around. And so I started thinking that these petroglyph sites, that these rocks were probably being turned into large heads and were going to be used as funerary objects in people's tombs. So this rock at San Diego Mountain is one of the more brightly colored ones I've ever seen after adjusting the colors. You can see that as a whole it makes a large head, but there are also all these other figures and different ways to look at it. It's very detailed. It's a spectacular work of art. So I also noticed that some of the carvings on this rock look a little like Sanskrit. They have some loops on the top and tails at the bottom like Sanskrit writing. So I did some extreme color adjustment on this old faded photo I have of this large boulder, and just wow, look at the amount of line work on this rock. Doing some different adjustments, get some of that line work to come through, but also get the shadings of the different colors on the rock to come through. And once you do that and you start outlining it, you start seeing these various figures. Again, the petroglyphs are just part of the art. On this rock, you can see the grid patterns, how they were laying these out. You could draw it out on paper and then scale it up to a rock using this grid pattern. And you can see a pretty amazing looking, scary face looking up and to the left. It can also be an animal. If you look in the lower left, there's several characters there that look Asian. And I've seen some other Asian characters in this rock art at this site. So let's move on to another site, famous site, Three Rivers in southern New Mexico. So I have a few old faded photos from this site. If you, again, adjust the colors, you start to see the same pattern, that the entire rock is part of the art and not just the petroglyphs. So if you zoom out on this one and adjust the colors, you can see it's a one large face. As you zoom in, you can see other characters, people in bondage, it appears. Even a small area, you can see the face here, but if you adjust it, you can start to see a hook and mechanisms and straps and someone that appears to be in bondage. If you look at all the rocks together as a whole, you can see that they're all chipped at, different layers and faces, and then in this case, two rocks kissing. And this is a common theme in prehistoric art, in this rock art that I'm finding, and in the geoglyphs that I'm finding as people kissing. I believe that in some cases these rocks were meant to be reoriented in a tomb, maybe standing up like this, a character with a weapon, and he appears to be an executioner. If you look in, I colored in what's supposed to be a sheep, but it's actually a guy and his head strapped into this device that's going to rip his spine out. Another common theme in prehistoric art. As you start to look around these sites more, you'll see that the rocks have all been placed purposefully in different positions. In this case, what appears to be a simple mask on a rock, if you turn it over and color it in, appears to be maybe a statue of a bird. Again, it could have been meant to be in someone's tomb. In the dark area at the top of this rock, that there's two faces, kind of Egyptian, almost Phoenician looking characters, and that the rocks on the ground are all rubbed at and chipped to make all these different figures, and that it's not just, again, the petroglyphs. If you flip it over, it may have been meant to be displayed in a tomb like this. Now I'll show you why I believe that these were going to be inside of tombs. If we go back to this one panel and look at it in a different way, I kind of masked out some of it so you can see that there's this guy up on top of this double helix stairway, putting these rocks together maybe with mortar to create these large statues inside a tomb. This would be a fairly large tomb, even if you were a little person. And at the bottom you can see the baskets and the pottery and stuff. That's going to be the grave goods. And off on the lower left, another character, a stone figure that's on a bricked in piece of wall there. It's a pretty amazing scene, and I think that eventually when people catch on, they're going to find some pretty amazing tombs. This is a nice rock art panel at the Lucero wash site in southern New Mexico. You can see all these really nice petroglyphs pecked into this rock. But you can also see, even in this old kind of dark photo, all this different shading and variation on the rock. And do some adjusting of the photograph and outline all the various shaded areas, and you start seeing the picture, and it's pretty amazing. Very African looking characters. If you look in the lower right, you see even like this beehive shaped house. Just look at it for a while, pause it and look at it. The whole thing, of course, forms a giant head. This is another rock from that site. Has a lot of complex line work on it. Adjusted the colors and masked out some of the edge to show that it forms a face to the left. Near Fort Hancock, south of El Paso, Texas, there are whole rock faces, sides of hills that have been carved and painted into really complex, large scenes. In this case, you see a lot of guys feeding birds by putting food in their mouth. If you want, pause and look at it for a while. This is another large rock face out near Fort Hancock. You can see the chipped petroglyphs down in the bottom portion and up on the top. But you can also see that it's all chipped and it's all rubbed and there's all different colors and variations. And when you adjust the colors and start outlining the different shades, you see that there's a faces, people kissing. And when you move in, it changes. It looks like characters riding on gorillas. Another large rock face at Fort Hancock. See petroglyphs all over this. The whole rock itself forms a face, as well as other characters and faces embedded within it. And if you outline it this way, you can see all these characters riding in some sort of vehicle that appears to be suspended by ropes. Another large rock at Fort Hancock is peck marks all over this, but don't look at the light areas, look in the dark areas and start outlining it all, and you'll see lines of people being ready to be beheaded. Another common theme in prehistoric art, and it's in other places right here around Fort Hancock. And if you look, the whole rock forms a large head of someone that's in bindings or has a blindfold on. Another large complex panel at Fort Hancock. Lots of petroglyphs on this rock. When you start adjusting the colors, and you see that these petroglyphs are actually part of a different kind of picture, and that they form sort of artistic elements. In this case, you can see how these things we call burden carriers form the highlights on the face of some sort of animal characters. Flip this one over and it looks almost like a scene out of a sci-fi movie. This is a pretty amazing boulder by Fort Hancock. You can see all the anthropomorphic figures with horns pecked into this, the petroglyphs that everybody sees. You can also see all the different coloration on this rock. And you flip it over, you do some adjustment, you see that all those characters are actually an artistic element that creates a highlight on animal noses and people's noses. In this case, you can see a man in the middle with dogs on his right and monkeys on his left. This looks like an old faded photograph of this guy and his animals. It's pretty amazing. The artistic techniques to create this sort of realistic depiction is, to me, very amazing. So after seeing how these petroglyphs have been used to create different highlights and create different faces and figures, I wonder if there wasn't even some sort of guide or even a book that showed if you want to make a face of this animal, you carve out this little figure on the rock. Another strange petroglyph at the same site, the figure with the really large horns. Turn it over, adjust it a little bit, you see that this rock is, as a whole is a guy's face. And that petroglyph is just an element in this picture. And they were even carving out these large rocks. Those are drill holes. I don't think that they were used as mortar holes. I think all these holes in the rocks out here are drill holes. I don't think there's anything out here that really needed to be pounded in a stone mortar. These are pretty amazing because, again, if you pose them in the right direction and color them in like they were maybe going to be painted, you can see what they were doing with these rocks. In the same area, there's a shelter that has this white pictograph of a Quetzalcoatl on it that everybody can see and is obvious, but what people don't see is all the different various shadings and colorations and other line work on the ceiling of this shelter, and how if you adjust it and again draw in the different shaded areas in different ways, you'll see a multitude of different figures and faces, and with some of the same common themes of people being beheaded and people kissing, other things. I'm going to end part one here. Follow the QR codes to my Pinterest boards if you'd like to look at these pictures that I'm using in these videos. In part two, I'm going to show a couple sites in Arizona, Chaco Canyon, and also discuss what I think about the Paleolithic sites in France.